Welcome, people, to the Real Collective podcast. As always, I am Sean Tasse, joined by my illustrious host from the basement, Kyle. How are you doing today?
Got brand new internet. Let's rock and roll. That's why we're home. Had
You
to
know,
be there between 8 and like 8
yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
make sure they got there on time.
We
So
were
yeah, that's why we're at home.
we were talking off air about losing an episode. We had an episode recorded. We referenced it last episode, and it just disappeared into the ether. That was a result of bad internet. I don't know if it was mine or yours, but it sucks to have
Yeah.
lost it. But we've got it back. So as always, guys, hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who you think might like this kind of conversation. You can download us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We're going to talk a little bit about today about confirming our own, giving ourselves a little bit of a pat on the back because some of the stuff we talked about, as well as a theory or a strategy, a negotiation strategy when you're buying a house that I call threading the needle and how to do that properly. And we've also got a return friend of the show, sponsor for today, Magic Mind. We'll talk a little bit more about them in a second. I'm going to pop a shot of Magic Mind and tell you how easy it is to take that shot, how easy it is to keep yourself feeling amped up and feeling dialed in. Here it is. That's it.
You get shake on?
I
Shake
did
that
shake.
up?
Yeah, yeah. I gave it a shake before.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was flipping it. So yeah, Magic Mind. We'll talk a little bit more about the experience that we have with that productivity shop. Subtly sweet. It's a nice little flavor. You can also download the podcast information on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Download the buyer or seller guides below, and you can also schedule an appointment with Kyle and I in the Calendly links below. But before we get into talking about threading the needle, Kyle, we've been right about a bunch of stuff recently, and you pat yourself on the back for that for sure. What have you seen in the market that you've been right about?
Well, yeah, I think it just I think it I don't like to say that I'm right, but I mean I guess we were. It's interesting now because I'm working on these deals for clients, and I'll be honest, it was a little bit slow. Had a lot of pre-approvals. We were working with people asking a lot of questions, waiting for rates to drop. And then now I've had a bunch of people that just jumped into the market, which is cool. But on a couple episodes ago, we were talking about, getting a deal, how to buy in the fall. I hope that wasn't the one that went AWOL on us, but the it could have been. But and we were talking about how, typically in the fall, we're going to see prices come down a little bit. We're going to see that the people entering the market are the ones that waited and are probably don't have kids, single income, good income, or double incomes, but no kids, or families that have young kids that it's not going to affect schooling or anything like that. And that's literally every single client I have right now. I even have a pair that the young family actually they were stuck in a bidding war the other day because of just the price point on this one place that people were letting go for relatively cheap, and then everybody else is, like I said, double income, no kids, sat on it, tons of down payment, and they're buying well underneath their budget. So it's interesting to see that that's exactly how the fall has shaped up so
Yeah.
far.
People, I think a lot of times the people who have kids, especially school age kids, are trying to buy in the spring so they can move in the summer so the kids can be in a new school, right? That's why we see a lot of it in the springtime. That adds to it, as well as the military transfers, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's when you've been doing it for as long as you and I have, you start to see, hey, these things tend to happen every year, right? And as a result, you can make some really neat you can give some really good insight. During COVID, it was all messed up. The seasonality was out the window, but we're back. We're back to a regular seasonality, right? And you can even talk about like the average price point and how that changes, and you can foresee what's going to happen. It makes it so that every year I sit down for the last probably 7 or 8 years, and I'll do an El Predicto, and I'll talk about what I'm expecting out of the market. I typically wait until the end of January to do that because January sort of sets the stage for the whole year, and you can see, okay, well, this is where we're starting, here's where we're going to go, and here's where we're going to end up, right? And it just makes it really neat. And it's funny because a lot of times you'll see the sale price in December and the sale price in January being so drastically different, but they shouldn't be. right? But there's just this it's a new year, new money feeling. It's really interesting. And again, dude, we know what we're talking about, so of course we're gonna be right. You know, for the most part. I mean, there's gonna be outliers, there's gonna be things we get wrong, but when you're dialed in, you're dialed in. Like this stuff. And
Yeah, and it's gonna be. I think, and it's interesting to see how it does pan out too, because there's always something. It'll be interesting to see what the interest rates do to the mentality and what people are going to like if it's gonna push, it's gonna bump anything higher. In terms of like activity, it'll be interesting to see how that. Be interesting to see how that pans out for us. And how many people are gonna wait or not. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how what impact that has on everything going forward. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see if we're right or not.
I think we're gonna see the smart buyers will buy now, and everyone else will wait until the spring, and it's gonna be there's more people who are gonna wait until the spring because not everybody's the smart buyer, right? And then there'll be more buyers in the spring, and then it's gonna be more bidding wars. Like we did one last week, and there was a bidding war for sure. You know what? I will talk about threading the needle because that was one of the instances. So we were on the selling side, not on the buying side, and we put a property on the market. We put it on for pretty much fair market value. We had 3 offers for it, and we sold it to the best offer that didn't have a condition of the sale of their house, right?
Right.
So we didn't want to tie it up to the sale of another house. It just seemed too risky. The only offer we got was standard, home inspection, mortgage financing for a week. Sure, we'll sell it to you. And the difference was a couple $1,000, and so for a couple $1,000, it wasn't worth the risk of what if that house doesn't sell, and we're just sitting and waiting. So, anyways, we sold it, and as they were moving through the process, those buyers said, "Hey, you know what? We need a little bit longer for our financing because we've got the financing approval, but it's subject to appraisal. So we want to push our financing condition." I'm like, "You don't need to push your financing condition for appraisal. There were 3 offers for this property. You don't think it's going to appraise at exactly what you bought it for? Come on." And he's like, "Oh well, that's what the buyer wants to do." I'm like, "Man, if you guys ask for an extension, we're gonna wind up with a backup offer, and you're not gonna get it. So you might as well sort yourself up." And I told the agent, I said, "Look, it was the weekend. I said, please book your home inspection. You can't do it on Wednesday. Wednesday was our due date for conditions. You can't do it on Wednesday. Do it on Tuesday. Book it Tuesday morning." Monday rolls around, it's not booked. Tuesday morning rolls around. "Oh hey, yeah, we need an extension." I'm like, "You can ask for an extension, but there's not going to be one given to you because we're going to have a backup offer." And so we did. So we got a backup offer. Now, if I was representing the buyer of that wanted to submit the backup offer, I would have done it differently to thread the needle because he tried to thread the needle, and all it did was push the first people into a spot where they firmed up. So he
So
didn't.
what do you mean when you say thread the needle?
So I mean, you want to buy a house, but it's conditionally sold.
Yeah.
You need to get in there, and you need to do it exactly at the right time when you're not going to force the first people to firm up.
So he came in with a backup offer too early, too close to the end, but not far enough away
That's right.
from it being done.
That's
So he
right.
forced the first people's hands to just say, "Fuck it, let's do this."
Yeah. Yeah. And they found some stuff
Gotcha.
in the inspection. They're like, "Hey, will you fix this?" We're like, "No, we don't have to fix it." And so they're just like, "Okay, we'll take it." Because the second offer was more. And those were the people who offered more, but subject to the sale of their house, they sold their house within like
Right
3
away.
going on the market. So they shouldn't have
Yeah.
put the offer in subject to the sale of their house because we would have taken it from them in the first place because it was a higher offer, right? But with the sale of their house condition, no, thank you. The sale of their house condition got removed during the conditional period here. So if I was representing that buyer in this scenario, what I would have done is figure out, okay, well, when does your condition die? When, like Wednesday at what time? I mean, the number was 6 p.m. And at that point, I would say hey, I'm going to send you this offer, but it's not going to be until Wednesday at 5 p.m. So when I talk about threading the needle, it's about understanding all the dynamics and understanding the motivations, because that first buyer so is not, you have to tell the first buyer that there's a backup offer as soon as you are considering accepting it.
Oh, okay.
So if there is no backup offer for you to tell them about, then you don't have to consider accepting it. Then you don't have to tell them. And so if you say to them, "No, we're not going to extend your conditions," then they sometimes just walk away, right? Which is ultimately what you want them to do. If you're getting a backup offer, typically it should be a better offer than the first offer that you have. And so that was this scenario. Guy came in too early, right? So
Yeah, I would. Yeah, the tough part. I disagree with you on the appraisal thing, though.
tell
Hundred
me,
percent.
tell me.
I just like when you're like no, like there's three other offers. We just take one of those, right? And we don't think it's gonna. What do you when you said you're like, oh, what do you think it's not going to appraise? And I get where the clients come from though, because if they don't have any extra money, and real estate agents are wrong. Bank doesn't care. They've now firmed up and have a tough time closing your deal, right?
Well, let me ask you this: you think there's a chance that 4 real estate agents are wrong?
How do we know? Well, explain that to me. How do we know there's four?
Because there was the listing agent who determined the price and did a CMA,
Hmm.
and obviously did some market research, and it was a good enough CMA and market research that 3 other agents submitted an offer for a property, and they were all around or at or above the listing price.
Yeah. So I get, yeah, and I get that too. And that's the conversation I would have with my clients is like, and the realtor is like, how close do we think we are here, guys? Right? Like, how close do we think we are? If it was put up at asking and you're coming in at asking, or a little bit more, like how confident are we in this number, right? Um, yeah,
Let's
how confident are we in this number? And on the financing side, they should probably be aware of that. Like I would think, see, this is where we don't know, right? When you have 20% down, there's a higher likelihood of a mortgage of a appraisal being needed. And so that's one thing. And the second thing is when you've got to if it's insured, there's less likelihood.
right.
But if the bank is saying, hey, or the insurer is saying, hey, we need an appraisal, that does bring up a flag of, ooh, where is the price on this? Because they usually hit, right? If it's listed properly, they usually hit and there's nothing's asked. So that would be a little bit of a flag.
So this one in particular, they were able to, because we put the boots to them, they were able to get the appraisal done that day, right? So they call, oh, hey, we can't do the appraisal till Friday. We're not giving you an extension. Oh, okay, we're gonna go and do the appraisal on Tuesday.
Okay. So that's okay. So then there was some game going down there.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
And
right.
that's the interesting stuff, right? When you say it the first time, you say it the first time, and they're just like, we need appraisal, and you're like, no. I'm like, why are you doing that? But now when you start playing that game, it's like, all right, that's a game. No
Yeah.
problem.
Well, and I will bet you $20 that the appraisal amount comes back for exactly the purchase price on a scenario like this.
Well, they're supposed to. They won't come back higher. They
Right.
won't come back higher. They're going to come back as asked or lower. That's what they'll come back at.
Right.
They almost never come in higher unless you're like, you stole this. And the appraiser's gonna do you solid.
Right. But even then,
So
it's those are the scenarios where it's like, okay, well, I'm not just doing you stole it. I'm not just doing the appraisal for the appraisal. I'm doing it for the appraised after repair value, because you're doing some funky stuff, like you're fixing it up and you want to refinance it after you've done the work on it, right? So that's where it gets a little funky. But on a typical regular purchase, I think the only thing about this one that I didn't tell you is that it is well in septic. And it's far enough out of Ottawa that maybe someone said, you know what, we want to know more about this, and that's fine. But
yeah, yeah, but even that should be more inspection stuff. The bank would just be throwing on extra conditions of like I want to see a well, I want to see a
Yeah,
well
yeah,
certificate. I want to see want to see when it was pumped last, for the septic, all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Typically wouldn't show up into the appraisal,
No,
but
exactly. And I mean, that's again why I really think that I'm in this scenario. Yes, I agree with you. If the bank, you get your conditional approval and it's conditional on a bunch of stuff. The thing is, it always used to be that you would have a conditional approval, you would waive your financing condition, and then some of the conditions wouldn't be fulfilled until a month before you take possession, or 2 weeks before you take possession, or the appraisal sometimes would be like a day or two before possession, right? Like that's how it used to be. Like the appraisers would go and they would appraise the property just before possession because they have to get that appraisal done at the last minute, right?
yeah, which shouldn't be either. That should all be taken care of.
Right. But I mean, you give someone an approval and you say, yeah, okay, you know what, you're approved as long as you pay off your credit cards. Well, sometimes their credit cards don't get paid off until their house sells. And their house sale, they've got a bridge mortgage going to their next one, right? And it's like, yeah, okay, you've got a conditional approval, but the conditions won't be met until closing, the day before closing, right? Or as a result of the proceeds from closing. So all of that, for someone to say, "Oh, I'm not going to remove my financing condition because I only have a conditional financing condition," it stops the machine from turning, right? And that's the agent and the mortgage broker's responsibility to tell the client, "Hey, this is all going to happen, but those conditions on your approval aren't going to be removed until closing day. But you've got to
Well,
firm
that's
up."
why that's why conditional approval. That's why every approval is conditional,
Yeah,
right? Like even the ones you say no, it's 100%. It's never 100%.
that's right.
It's not, right? It's on the assumption you're going to be able to approve. You're going to be able to meet all these conditions at some point,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So yeah, it's up to us. It's up to us to help walk them through that, and understand the risk of that. And that's why I just find it interesting. I find it funny that we're like, oh, it's conditional. I've got my financing condition. I'm like, there's so many times the financing isn't approved,
Yeah,
like technically,
yeah,
because you haven't paid off the credit card. Your house has not sold,
yeah.
right? So just understand what you're risking when you do that.
Well,
And
and
that's
it's important to have a clear mind and to have all of this figured out and sorted out, and that's why we're so happy to re-partner with Magic Mind. We've talked about them a bunch of times this year. There's a little bit of green left at the bottom of the bottle. Keep it in the fridge. Pop it first thing in the morning. Crack it open. Swig it down. Have your coffee afterwards. The taste goes away, and it just really you get dialed in without feeling like amped up. With sometimes the coffee you get jitters or the energy drink or whatever like that. But with this, you're just like dialed and it's like boom, task complete, task complete, task complete. And they've got so many cool things in them, for more focus, more energy, and less stress. I don't know about you, but there's stuff in there that's like, yeah, okay, I got this. I got this figured out. My brain works better with it. So
Yeah, I'm excited to get back on it. I haven't got my box yet, but I'm excited to get back on it because I am trying to just. It's been now that we're back. It's October, like the routine has set in,
yeah.
and to keep that level is key. Like it's busy right now. It's
Yeah.
busy, I find myself lacking a little. So I was excited when they came back on board. I'm like, that's cool. I'm excited. I'm good to get that going again for
Yeah.
sure.
No, big fan. It's really helped overall with my you know, I told you guys this before, I wake up 3, 4 times at night because of a 2-year-old who wakes up at night and needs to nurse. So that's something. But it really helps keep me focused and keep me going through the day. So yeah, for sure. Shout out to Magic Mind. All the info is below in the description below. All the info about how you can order, how you can get it. Get on their affiliate link with us, and all that information is down below. We don't know what it is because we just restarted, but we'll talk about it a little bit more. But yeah, the other experience that I had about threading the needle recently, I was representing the buyers. And listen to this story time. We walked into a house on Saturday morning. These guys called. They said, "Hey, we want to go and see this house. It just came back on the market. We just got an email. Blah 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 blah. Oh, okay, cool. Came back on the market. I'll book a showing. We go see it. Whatever it was, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They asked me about it like at 9 or 10 Saturday afternoon. Yep, let's go see it. Cool. hey, it's not showing on my system anymore. It was showing before, now it's not. Okay, let me look it up, scroll through the link. Oh, you know what? It was back on the market, and 15 minutes later, it got conditionally sold again. I'm sorry. Right, yeah. So it's like obviously something was happening in the background,
Right.
right? So I called the agent. I'm like, what's going on here? She's like, oh yeah, we had a backup offer. I'm like, oh, I'm like, and they asked me, hey, can we see it? And I didn't book it right away. They say, hey, can we see it? I'm like, yeah, we'll go see it. It's vacant. It's not going to sell that quickly after it comes back to the market. Anyways, it was originally listed like 915. It dropped to like 840. Right.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, like it got there, right? But eventually it was at 840. And then someone had bought it, obviously walked away from it, wasn't able to get the financing. Someone else came along and bought it. And that's who we were waiting for. We were waiting in the wings to see what would happen with them. And so my client said, look, if anything changed, like this is the house. We like this house. This would do it for us. This checks all the boxes, this is what we're looking for. Da 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 da. Great. Sorry you can't buy it. Ugh, okay, if anything changes, let us know. Friday rolls along. They're like, hey, the listing agent calls me. Hey, it looks like they did their inspection and they're gonna ask us to put in a new furnace and AC. Ooh, say more. I ask questions. I understand. Okay, what do I think that they've bought it for, and what do I think that they're going to try and ask for? It by asking questions. They didn't put They didn't put a financing condition in, but they didn't put an inspection condition in. Right, the first people put a financing condition. The deal fell apart because they weren't able to put the financing together. These guys put their inspection condition in, but not a financing condition. So they went through, they did the inspection. They say, hey, the furnace and AC are like 18 years old. The house is 18 years old. We want you to put in a new furnace and AC. And it's going to be 15 grand for you to do that. So don't worry about it. Take 15 grand off the price of the house. So my guess is, based on the conversations that I had with the listing agent, that they had bought the house. These second people bought the house for 825, and they were asking for another $15,000, 12 or $15,000 off the price, which would have brought them to 810. And so that's when the listing agent called me, when someone said, hey, here's a chance. Do you want it? Do you want this? Are your clients still interested? I called my clients Friday afternoon. We spent all day on the phone last week. Okay, how are we going to do this? They've got a mortgage broker, different than you. I'm sorry, but whatever. I called the mortgage broker. I'm like, hey, we do this? Can we submit an offer unconditional? Because I knew that to thread the needle, we would have to be an unconditional offer. And so my clients were like, we're not comfortable with unconditional. I'm like, yeah, no, I get that. That's a very risky thing for you to do. Let me see how I can mitigate these risks for you. Call the mortgage broker. Okay, are we good? Yeah, they're putting 25% down. Even if it doesn't appraise, we're fine. Right, and they're good. Like financially, they're fine. They could buy a house. It's $1 million. This one's 840 or eight. We were going to offer 830 because based on the conversation that I had with the listing agent, the other buyers seem to have bought it for 825 and were asking for 12 or 15 grand. They were probably going to land at something like 820, right? If the seller gave it up. So we went back and we said, look, if we're going to buy this place, you guys, we need to be unconditional at 830. And so that was our plan, and we were working everything out to get there. And they said, hey, you know what, we're not comfortable with the financing, but we solved all of that. We handled all of the objections. I sound like a salesperson a little bit, but it's like, look, if you want the house, I will mitigate all, not handle objections, I will mitigate all of the risks for you, right? So who do I talk to? What do I say? How do I make sure that everything's going to be fine for you? The other one, of course, was the inspection. So how are we going to mitigate that risk? Well, they already did an inspection, and the sellers agreed to do this, 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 and this. Okay, I will write clauses in there that say that no issues. Seller represents and warrants no issues with the roof, which is a brand new roof, foundation, blah 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 blah. Seller represents and warrants all these things, and also you found these things in the inspection. You're going to do. Here's your to-do list. And hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, buyer, sorry, you can close your deal with Chicago Title, and with the lawyers that we use here, they'll give you a 1-year warranty. So if the furnace or AC breaks down, you pay a $50 deductible and get a new furnace or AC. So here's how you overcome the old furnace and old AC. You buy the house 830 unconditional. and I will protect you in all of these different ways. This is how you're going to get it. The deal, she called me, the listing agent called me on Friday. We were going to go back and look at it again on Saturday. The deal lived until Monday at 6 p.m. So I told her, I'm like, look, I'm not giving you a backup offer. I'll give you a Form 810, which tells you that I have an offer, but I'm not going to give you the offer. I'll tell you what's in it, but I'm not going to give it to you until Monday at 5 p.m. And it's going to be irrevocable Monday at 8 p.m. Right. And so that's how you thread the needle. Unfortunately, on Saturday, the clients went driving around. They're like, yeah, you know what? This just isn't it. The neighborhood isn't for us. We don't love the neighborhood. We love the house, but we're just not sold on the neighborhood. So we're going to pass on it. I'm like, that's okay. But we went through the whole process and they were like, yeah. And even as much as took care of all of these concerns for us, we're still feeling a little bit apprehensive about going unconditional. So like, yeah, that's okay. So we went through this whole process. We got it so that they could have won the house, but they chose that they didn't want it. What can you do about that? So that's what I mean when I talk about threading the needle. How do you set yourself up? What questions do I need to ask the other agent? What conversations do I need to have with the mortgage broker? How do I mitigate all of those risks and still get you the house that you want and slide right into that exact spot? And it is threading the needle because you need to come in at the right time with the right offer that's actually going to get it done. And it's worked. It's worked a number of times for us. The other
No,
time,
that's cool.
the other time is exactly when a house does a price reduction. We talked about that before, right? As soon as they do a price reduction, don't let anybody else see it at the new price and give them the offer that day.
Right.
So that's a lot of talking for
Got to
me.
be on the ball.
Like,
Got to be on the ball for that one.
yeah. I mean, that's what it's all about. And again, if your brain is firing on all cylinders, I mean, I'm sorry to say it, but there's some agents, there's some mortgage brokers who are hungover, who are high, who are drunk, who are not all there, who are just barely scraping by, in terms of their mental capacity. You don't need that. You need someone who's sharp as a tack, who can take care of all this, who can juggle all these different things in their head, know what to say, know when to say it, know how to say it, and know who to say it to. And it's not. I said handling objections. That sounds too salesy. It's mitigating risks. That's the main thing, right? So I feel like I talked this whole second half. Sorry, dude.
That's right. Well, we had to get through that thread the needle part because it like that is a strategy, and that is and it comes back to what we've said a pile of times, right? Of just being prepared. You couldn't have those conversations, and you couldn't have the conversations and mitigate the risks if you weren't prepared, and if the clients weren't prepared, and if the broker wasn't prepared,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
you have to have all that stuff lined up to know what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and once you do, then you can start to employ some of these sort of next level strategies. And these are the ones that the savvy buyers. We talk about confirmation bias, bring it all the way back around to the beginning. Savvy buyers are taking advantage of, right? Winning bidding wars. How do you win a bidding war? How do you thread the needle, right? All of these things all have to do with the setup at the beginning and the execution in the moment, right? And being sort of having the experience is one thing, but then also being of sound mind, making sure that you've got your magic mind in you so that you have that edge over the competition to win it for your clients. That's super important. Or if you're watching this and you're just a regular person and you're not a real estate agent, because we're actually regular people too, or mortgage broker, check it out. Check out for sure Magic Mind. You can see the links below in the description. You can always download the Apple Podcast or Spotify below. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, share this with someone who you think might be interested in our conversation that we had today. You can also book an appointment with Kyle or I in the Calendly links below. You can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, watch on YouTube, and until next time, keep it real.
Collective.